Can you observe, doubt, and share? Well, then you're a civic scientist. My name is Celine Source, and this is the story of my uncle, microbiologist, doctor, and spark plug for microbiology. And he was a Belgian citizen, born in 1893 and died in 1950. And he actually did civic science before it had a name. Belgium, before World War II. Little Andre Gratia, that little boy there, is very, very sick. He's Gratia's nephew and my mother's cousin. And Andre Gratia will now become a citizen because he will now test his brand new antibiotic, an antibiotic cocktail, which has hardly been tested at all. No more control group, no need for that. A citizen needs help, let's give him the antibiotic. And this little boy's life was saved before World War II by an antibiotic in Belgium before World War II's wide use of penicillin. Science had been used in the civic context, but how did it all start? 1893, the year of birth of Andre Gratia. And it was a good time to use Jean Piaget's empirical and reflexive abstraction. At that time, the tiny new microscopic citizens were being seen through simple microscopes, bacteria, viruses, mold, and phages, with all their wars, alliances, hierarchies, communication, and gossip. And Gratia understood his macroscopic world and citizen, and from that, he was able to abstract that the micro citizens, maybe they behave just like us. They're not just simple chemicals on the slide, the way people thought they were. So he abstracts. Andre Gratia is, to know more about Andre Gratia, you really would have to know more about his father, Gustave. This is little Gratia with his father. And his father was a doctor, a veterinarian, a microbiologist, and a pharmacist, all in one. He interacted with farmers, mothers, tuberculosis patients, and at that time, scientists were not really isolated in their laboratory. They were actually mingling. They were one of the citizens, right there. They were ordinary citizens doing science oftentimes. And Gustave Gratia, the father, also liked to challenge established schemas. And little Andre Gratia watched his father doing this. In the early 1900s, there were actually two big microbiology schools in Europe. There was the Berlin School under Robert Koch, and there was the Paris School under Louis Pasteur. And there was a little Belgian school sandwiched in between. And this was also right after the Franco-Prussian War, shall I add? And at that time, Robert Koch of the German school said, milk pasteurization to prevent tuberculosis, 999. That's a French idea. No. And from his own, okay. So Belgian Gustave Gratia, who had studied actually under Pasteur, refused to assimilate this assertion. From his own applied tuberculosis observations directly on farms, he knew that Koch was dead wrong. And he used Piaget's constructive accommodation. And in 1903, he challenged the 1901 assertion by Robert Koch, and he said, Herr Professor, you are wrong. And well, then Belgium will eventually follow Gustave Gratia's advice and start to pasteurize milk, and so did a lot of other countries. And little Andre Gratia observed his father, Gustave Gratia, defied the status quo. Andre Gratia will continue to, like his father, to apply civic science in a civic context, actually, and this would be a war context. This would be World War I, where he, as a doctor, was talking to the heavily bleeding soldiers who had been triaged to die. On nous laisse mourir parce que nous saignons trop fort. We are bleeding too hard, so they don't just let us die. Very saddened, Andre Gratia will now apply science in context, and he will find the blood coagulant Staphylocoagulase made by a staph bacteria. And by the way, today this test, the Staphylocoagulase test, is still used to see if we have a staph infection. After the war, Andre Gratia will go work at the Rockefeller Center in New York, where he will still work with staph bacteria, and he will observe that something very mysterious is killing bacteria. He has actually isolated the first phage. A phage is a virus, and they need living bacteria, and they can reproduce. And he, by chance, also reads the journals of two other phage virus researchers, Ford and Durrell. And he believes and demonstrates that all three of them, Ford, Durrell, and himself, are all studying the same mysterious thing, but they didn't really know what it was. The phage debate, a Piagetian confrontation to change the schema. Back in Belgium, Gratia will work at the Free University of Brussels and the Belgium Pasteur Institute. And he will work under his boss and mentor, 1919 Medicine Nobel Prize, Jules Bordet. Now, even before we could see viruses, scientists were already arguing about what is this stuff. The British scientists were thinking, oh, it's a chemical. The Québécois French scientists were saying, c'est un virus, c'est un bactériophage. And Jules Bordet, Gratia's boss, had believed that they were actually just chemicals. And at first, a young Gratia was dutifully agreeing with his boss. Now imagine, you're a young scientist, barely 30, and your supervisor, lab chief, your patron, is a brand new Nobel laureate, and everybody defers to him. The safe thing to do would be to assimilate, right? Have you ever had to challenge your boss? However, by 1923, a young Gratia regains his confidence, and he will modify his premature assimilation of Jules Bordet's schema. Monsieur Nobel Prize winner Jules Bordet, I respect you, but you are wrong. Phages are viruses that attack bacteria. They're not just chemicals. Like father, like son, Andre Gratia has challenged the status quo. But here's the extraordinary thing. Even after he did challenge the status quo, he still continued to think, well, maybe my boss could be right after all. And he will continue to test both theories and hold multiple models simultaneously in his head. Decentration, he has an open Piaget mind, epistemological maturity, operational thought, I think you call it. And he will construct also a very predictive question. Phages, viruses, yeah, they attack, but could they also be useful? Today this is called phagotherapy, and it's actually used quite a bit in the Soviet Union. And one day, we're kind of bringing it back. You may even be using it for some kind of cancer treatment. It's not enough to know science, you're going to have to let it be known around the world too. I mean, for the common people, for the general public, excuse me. And Andre Gratia will actually now become, to vulgarize science, he will become a film hero character. He will be the composite, the 1931 Sinclair Lewis Aerosmith film drew from Gratia's life as a researcher. And the Gratia, right here, will actually be used as a composite model hero for Dr. Aerosmith. And bacteriologist Dr. Aerosmith, starring Ronald Colman, Helen Hayes, if you know the superstars from that era. Today that would be Tom Cruise. He will discover actually phage virus therapy, and he will give his new drug, a phage therapy drug, without further testing, which is exactly what Gratia did with his little nephew. And the film audience, especially at that time, no internet, right? Probably had never been in a laboratory, knew nothing about science. And now they will learn about the scientific method, science decision, drug trial financing, professional ridicule, fame, just from the movie, okay? For the public to trust science, they must see how science works. And I think today Gratia would have used social media very well, because he could make science, very complex science ideas very simple, and he probably would have put them up on YouTube. And he probably, because he was always wanting to do more research, he would have done a GoFundMe campaign to get lab resources and researchers. Aha, there he is in his laboratory. Oh, and by the way, quick aside, I just want to say, you notice that all the women, we don't know their names, we just know the names of the guys. But let me continue here. Gratia will now be ready to make his most important microscopic abstraction discovery, bacteriocins. Now, this is not phage virus on bacteria. This is literally one bacteria fighting another or interacting with another bacteria, bacteriocin. Gratia studies bacterial war zones, and he will observe with his lady assistant and co-author Ernest Rose and his lady assistant and co-author Sarah Dath, bacterial cannibalism. And do notice that at this time, women scientists were not usually mentioned as co-authors, but actually he did recognize several women in his work. Research is more important than social gender norms. Gratia and Lady Sarah Dath will continue to observe now penicillin, which is a mold on bacteria, but Gratia and Sarah Dath will never claim credit for penicillin discovery. This is deflating the Piaget epistemic ego, evaluating evidence, but don't praise yourself. But let's continue with the bacteriocin, bacteria on bacteria story. In 1925, Gratia will publish that they have noticed that cultures of E. coli bacteria strains actually interacted with each other with some kind of chemical. And this is the first bacteriocin. Bacteriocin, chemical secreted by bacteria that can hurt or help other bacteria. Aha, a potential antibiotic. Finally, Gratia has all the ingredients for his mycolysate antibiotic cocktail. That's the thing that saved his little nephew. And it contains bacteriocin, degradation products, phages, viruses, right? And a dash of penicillin. And mycolysates were a valid therapy in Belgium, already saving lives before World War II. Just a little quick note here. As you know, Alexander Fleming is credited with the discovery of penicillin, but just for the record here, he did share a lot of correspondence data and parallel research with Gratia, and he took an interest in Gratia's mycolysate and phages, and he actually says Gratia's work should be watched. And he followed Gratia's experimental protocol when researching for his penicillin. Just a note. Gratia will go on to do a lot more discoveries. Have you ever had shingles? Cold sore? That's when viruses kind of sleep in you.
Chickenpox.
Pardon?
Chickenpox?
Yeah, that's when viruses sleep in you, which of course makes it hard to know if they're there or not because they're sleeping. Mm-hmm. So it was really complicated to find that they could still okay, listen, I'm not going to go into detail. Yeah. But anyways, he did discover that viruses can sleep in us, dormant for a while, and then come back alive. He did a lot of things. But continuing here, he was always interested in new laboratory techniques. He actually used the 1925 centrifuge to separate glass sample. And in 1931, when the electron microscope finally came on the scene, which could see viruses and DNA, Gratia's reaction, j'en veux un. I want one. Unfortunately, the microscope was, shall we say, stolen? I mean, no, sorry, confiscated by the Americans when they came through Belgium. Oh, wow. Okay. And during the war, Gratia was also visited 2 times by the German police, and the University of Liège laboratory was completely looted, so a lot of information was lost by the Axis power. They wanted to know what the heck the Belgians were doing. You know, maybe that penicillin stuff. Okay. But Gratia actually, again, was a patriot, and he did citizen resistance. But always a scientist, he will abstract that microorganisms can also do resistance like him. They can mutate and hide. They can mutate. The punishing wartime experience, however, did not condition Gratia to give up. He will lead civic system change as an organizer of the new Belgian antibiotic and penicillin research center. And he will create the University of Liège new microbiology degree program, a novelty for its time. Because as you know, they thought that microbiology was just chemicals. It wasn't important essentially. And so Belgium got its first microbiology degree program just at the time of the war. And in 1949, he was nominated for a Nobel Prize with the support of Alexander Fleming, so this is 1949, but unfortunately, 1950, overworked, exhausted. Gratia will pass away in Nyon, Switzerland, where he had gone to rest, and he was only 57. And Belgium's Queen Elizabeth will send a wreath to the funeral of a Civic Science national hero. International fellow scientists will send condolences. He is gone. His bacteriocin, however, bacteria, will be taken up, his research will be taken up by many laboratories, including the Singulan laboratory in Belgium right now. And it may even be used in the hantavirus crisis that we're going through. And, but more importantly, it will definitely be used for the antibiotic resistance research problem that we now have in the hospitals. We could shut down our hospitals in a few years. So it will be very, very useful. What other scientists would have appreciated the search for knowledge of Andre Gratia? Well, Jean Piaget knew that knowledge is alive. Knowledge needs brain food, you gotta feed it. And Andre Gratia had actually said, science is a golden goose that will lay eggs to the extent that it is nourished. If you let it die of hunger, it will be ruined. And Andre Gratia calls you to serve civic sciences news. 1, observe. Knowledge needs public trust, an assurance that humanity is choosing the right path. It's a form, actually, I think, of public love. If you love the public, you love knowledge. So 1, observe. 2, doubt. Stay ready to change and always have self-doubt. Maybe you're still wrong. And 3, share. We are all citizen scientists and we must ask the right questions and abstract the correct science knowledge. Thank you. Questions?
Such a good picture. Thank you so much for the whole presentation. It was lovely. Okay, questions?
Question. A Piaget term?
How did you decide to research all that? It's your uncle, right?
Well, yeah. So I was visiting my aunts who were very, very old in Belgium. In the early 2000, they were all alone with children to take care of them. They were maiden aunts. And I kept getting this story about the little boy whose life was saved. And they said, oh, it's penicillin. Oh, yeah. I thought, I've never heard of this. And so that's what actually started me to get curious about this. And then I would be writing to a lot of museums, and I would be saying, but by the way, the story of penicillin is maybe not so simple as just, well, actually a lot of people had this word on penicillin. Even the Egyptians used some kind of penicillin. But so I was kind of saying, well, there was a guy called Gratia in Belgium, and he might have been involved a little bit. But the museums didn't really like changing the story. The public expects a certain sort of summary. So I just kept on researching. And actually, let me see if I have the slide here. I know this is his son. Mm-hmm. And so I started communicating with his son, who actually wrote a book about the history of Belgium. Oh yeah, the history of microbiology. And so I was getting more, and the main thing that he did was bacteriocins. Mm-hmm. Let's leave penicillin for Alexander Fleming, that's his thing, but him, yeah. So he, this was last year in Belgium, and his son here, who's also a microbiologist, spoke about his father, and that's kind of how the whole thing went. And he's 90, he was born in 1936. He was 16 when his father died in 1950. Oh, wow. So I do urge you to be, work hard and keep an open mind and all that, but don't work to the point of exhaustion. Yeah. Any other questions?
You didn't tell us before. some interesting fact or thought of you or idea. We probably told everything. It's okay. Just.
You mean some things that I might have cut out? Well,
Yeah,
he
something
did
that you will
so-
go home. Oh, I
Well,
forgot
you
to
know,
say
if I
that.
go back to that first slide, he did so many things that I can't, oh, yeah, okay, wait a minute, oh, yeah. All right, so this is when they are going to start the penicillin. By the way, penicillium is not the same thing as penicillin. Penicillium is the actual mold, and penicillin is when they actually were able to, make it into penicillin. And this person, and Heim is here, and Florey is here, they both shared the Nobel Prize with Alexander Fleming. But Alexander, you've never heard of them, right? You've only heard of Fleming? Okay, well, I wonder why. Because these guys also shared the Nobel Prize, but they somehow don't get mentioned, and somehow Fleming was a little too busy to be part of this ceremony. So history is written by more than one person, but we seem sometimes remember just one or two names. So that's it. And this is Gratia right here. Yeah. And then these were the workers that, the people that worked with Fleming and shared the Nobel Prize. I think he got it in 46, right after the war, because it had saved so many lives, right? Yeah.
Great presentation.
Yeah, I've got one as well. Do you think there's space in today's world for a figure like Andre? Do you think this could work today? If somebody, not the science, but the kind of person, taking some of those risks, doing civic science in that manner?
To actually speak up against your boss, who's a Nobel Prize winner, and there you are, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, and you're like 30. So I think he already knew when he came back from New York, and he had discovered what a phage was, which was a virus, and he had worked with Twort and Durrell. He didn't want to go into all the other scientists' name. Twort actually acknowledged that it's a virus. Whereas before
Can we be like this? Can David be like this?
But then his boss, Jules Bordet, was saying, no, it's a chemical. That's just the big Nobel Prize winner there. So at first he was very young, and he said, well, I better agree with my boss, I better assimilate this. But then after a while, no. He finally had to say, look, I'm going to accommodate. And there was a big debate. I mean, there was a lot of archival material. And I actually had people on the internet attack me. Because I was saying, well, Gratia, no, he did, and he did actually settle. I had lots of evidence that he did, including in the biography of Gratia written by this guy, that Maurice Welch, that it was Gratia who had settled the phage debate. They are viruses. But there was also a lot of, at first he agreed with his boss, so there was a lot of material that said, so I had people who were on these phage group who were saying, no, Gratia was against the idea that they were viruses, he thought they were chemicals. And I said, no, that's just in the beginning. And then this young guy started to get smart, this young university PhD, you might relate to that, Dave. He said, no, my boss is wrong, and they are viruses. And yeah, but so I had to start to put stuff out on the internet to set these guys straight, that no, in the end, he did come around and had the courage to stand up and say what he thought was right. But I don't know if I would have done it. Raise your hand if you would have done it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So that's the story.